Greetings, friends. Keith Costello here. I remember when my wife and I were first becoming parents, I got some of the most valuable advice I've ever received. I was told that one way to best instruct your child of how to live is to repent well. I remember being surprised by it. Repent well? What do you mean? And they told me wisely that there would be moments that I would be short or lack patience or be too harsh or make a snap decision that was not right. And the process of making amends for those inevitable errors that all parents make was to go and repent well with your children. First off, it would restore the relationship, and secondly, it would provide a great example to them about how they should live their lives and face errors that they had made. And I was thinking about that in reviewing the United States Constitution, because we know at this point in history that the U.S. Constitution and the founding of our nation included both brilliant insights and also horrific compromises that really were moral failures in many respects. And those failures, those moments of hypocrisy that were in our Constitution, ended up creating circumstances that created immense pain and loss, but also moments of real growth and celebration when they were amended. I think the framers of our Constitution understood that things would need to change and adapt. I think many of them also understood that they were facing compromises that weren't really fully moral, didn't fit the ideals on which the nation was founded. And so they were wise to put in a process within the Constitution to amend it. As the highest law of the land, it needed to be amended. And the amendment process is very healthy in that it is a very high bar. It is difficult to amend the Constitution, but it's possible. And we've seen that throughout American history. If you just think about different aspects of the wisdom of the framers of the Constitution, the innovations like Republican democracy and a framework for limited government that could be sustained over a long period of time, the carrying forward and refining other commitments that had happened in other countries before this as far as the protection of individual rights. And so they wisely ensconced those ideals within the Constitution. But the Constitution was difficult to achieve, and it brought about compromises that were really just awful in some respects. The Declaration of Independence had declared that all men are created equal, and by that, at least some of the framers, I think, believed they meant all people. We had a gender bias that just hindered our nation for so many years. And again, the Constitution allowed for the continuance of the institution of slavery and prejudicial systems just based on a person's background, the color of their skin, the language that they spoke. There were all kinds of prejudices that occurred, and the racial prejudice was actually ensconced in the Constitution with the Three-Fifths Compromise. And so those things did not fit the ideals on which we were founded. In fact, they were egregious violations of what we said that we believed. And so you had profane policies that just created festering wounds in our nation. And those things festered for years and years. Ultimately, we had to fight a civil war where hundreds of thousands of Americans killed one another over the hypocrisies that we had ensconced in the Constitution and about how we were going to live going forward. But as we got through those things, you saw the amendment process allow our country to address many of the egregious compromises that had happened early on. The first 10 amendments, the Bill of Rights, were necessary even to get the ratification of the Constitution done, and they ensconced individual rights, which so many in the nation thought were indispensable if we were going to have a constitutional law, this umbrella law that was above all other things. And so they put those in. It took the Civil War, the split of the nation, the fact that the southern states were not involved in the deliberation in order to get the 13th Amendment passed and ensconced in the Constitution that abolished slavery. And then later on, of course, you've got the right for women to vote. You've got, with the 19th Amendment, the 24th Amendment that abolished the poll tax, and from a socioeconomic standpoint, did more to equal the playing field for voting rights in our country. So our nation has used this amendment process that was wisely put in the Constitution to address issues that have occurred over time. And so the march of history and constitutional amendments have turned the most egregious pieces of hypocrisy within the Constitution. Most of the time, our constitutional amendments have ensured that the liberties expressed in our Constitution are actually being provided to the citizenry of the United States. You see this in the Bill of Rights, and it's very significant that the First Amendment, as I've said in a previous episode, begins with religious liberty. It's the most foundational, central, highest priority individual right that we can have in order to actually protect personal liberty. And it can be really difficult to stick to this commitment and this ideal, because it puts us in a position to have to tolerate other people's religious beliefs. But I believe it's critical that we staunchly support religious liberty, because even when the person is voicing with every ounce of their strength a position that you personally abhor, right? Their ability and freedom to have that belief protects my ability to have my beliefs. And this agreement that we're going to honor the religious, we're not going to agree with each other. I'm not saying that. And we're not going to celebrate viewpoints that we not only don't agree with, but in some cases we may find despicable. And so that's not part of what the framers were trying to ensconce in the Constitution, that we would all mutually celebrate what each other believed. That is not what they were about. But we do have to tolerate the different beliefs, and we have to support the right of people to have their own religious convictions, belief convictions, because it's what protects our rights. So these things have been really attacked in certain circles. The institutional circumstances of prejudice that were initially ensconced in the Constitution and then later remedied out of the Constitution were put into practice in various ways throughout American history, and we're still dealing with some of the repercussions of those things. I think most notably you see it in public education. In public education, we see generations of home developments and city developments that have created inequities in educational environments. We see those disproportionately harming people of lower socioeconomic strata and people of color. We see that, and even beyond in its extent, beyond any of that, we see a prejudicial turn against positions of faith within our public school system. That is contrary to the Constitution. So the Constitution guarantees the religious liberty of all citizens. So that includes every teacher, every student, every parent, every administrator, any of the people working within the school systems in the U.S. who are citizens of the U.S. have these rights protected. But our paradigm for funding education does not protect us. In fact, it is violating both, in my opinion, the Establishment Clause and the Free Exercise Clause. And so I believe that our funding paradigm in the United States simply must change. There must be transparent and equitable funding for all religious belief systems. And I think that we need to address some of the inequities that happen in funding based on geographic location, because those things are still tied to prejudicial systems of the past. And so we need to make a way. We need to make amends. Now, in this case, I do not believe there's any amendment to the Constitution necessary to achieve those things. We have simply not applied what the Constitution says to our education funding paradigms. And that's what has to change. I believe it is time for us to test the constitutionality of the way that we fund schools, and we need the judiciary and ultimately the Supreme Court to weigh in on whether or not the funding structures of our nation meet constitutional criteria, because I believe they clearly do not. So how can you get involved? I'm asking you to join our Be Wise campaign. The link to our website's down at the bottom of this video. And you can go there. You can, the Be Wise campaign, it's an acronym. So watch these videos as you are here. Impart what you've learned from them, meaning like the videos, subscribe to the channel, and share them with others. Please share them with others. The S is for sign the petition. We got a simple petition that declares that we believe that religious liberty is ensconced in the Constitution and it should apply to education. So read that petition on the website, go and sign it. Also, the E stands for empower. We need funding to continue the effort to point these things toward the judiciary and help citizens know how they can have these things reviewed. And we need to push this all the way to the Supreme Court. So I ask for your consideration. You can make a one-time donation. You can become a sponsor of Curated Christian Education Services and help us in this effort to bring religious liberty through school choice. Blessings to you.